Hello, I'm Guy, and this is Guy Robot. Hello! Firstly, apologies for not having that many videos recently and for this room sounding massively echoey in this video. I'm still waiting to move house and there's no end of trouble with that. Hopefully I'll be sorted soon. This video, however, is one I've been planning on making for some time, so I thought I'd do it anyway and try and bring it to you now. With the rather clickbaity title of Being a Software Developer Sucks, I thought I would explain a little bit about my journey, why I stopped being a software developer, and why I actually do think working in the software development industry does suck if you love developing software. So I wrote my first line of code when I was 7 years old. Before that, I used to take apart VCRs and TVs that my uncle, who was a TV repairman, used to give me, and I'd try and fix them and make them work. When I had my first computer, which was a Commodore 64, writing my first line of code, having it ask me my name and say, "Hi Guy, how are you?" It just blew my mind at the capabilities of what I could potentially do with this thing. And I pretty much coded every day since then. By the age of 15 in the late 90s, I was working as a commercial software developer. I was getting paid crazy amounts of money considering I was living at home. And this was the peak of the original internet boom, and jobs were plenty, and I just worked home while I was at school. Over the years, I've run a few different businesses of my own. I've got a computer science degree. I have worked at Hewlett Packard in their research and development team with storage technology, where I even did stuff on really low level SCSI drivers and communications. I've worked on countless internet systems with custom network protocols on a massively distributed scale. I've worked at Symantec in their cloud business unit. I've headed up the technical team on a big SI when business to business mobile apps were becoming big in the early 2010s. I've spent years working as a technical architect for one of the big mining companies, managing the whole of the solution for one of their high-end product lines. And I even had a brief stint working in technical management. Over the years, I've been self-employed. I've been a software engineer. I have been a technical architect, a solution architect. I have been a senior manager reporting directly to CTO level. I've been a self-employed IT contractor. You name it, I've probably done it. I've worked across all the different fields. I've worked across a dozen or more programming languages, and I love coding. But I never really got into liking it as a job, even when I ran my own business. So I suppose before I say why it sucks, why is software development an awesome career to have? Well, the salary is one thing. I ended up being on a very large six-figure salary. But that's not where everyone ends up. However, that's still a very real possibility. If you work as a WPF contract developer in London and you're working on front office trading solutions, you can get £850 a day contract rate. Certainly not bad. Even at the low end of the market as a junior developer, you can easily get £30,000 a year in the United Kingdom, which is more than most people get as an average salary towards the end of their career, let alone at the start of it. And £50,000 as a software developer is certainly a eminently achievable salary rate in most places in the United Kingdom. So that's good. Travel. I've been to India. I've been to United States. I've been to countless places in the US, actually. I've been all across Europe, all thanks to working as a software developer. Going to India was an awesome experience, getting to see their take on how to set up a new business and their IT infrastructure and the different challenges that it entailed. Gadgets, lots of gadgets. I've got through countless laptops, new phones, tablets, top-end shiny devices because I've worked in IT and I've been able to play with them. I've needed them for my job, but as a geek, that bit still very much appeals to me. Some of it is fun. Some of the systems I've worked on have had huge scope and scale. I've had to design systems that have worked for the legal system and had to meet stringent security requirements so cases didn't get thrown out in court. There are some really interesting bits. And when it's not interesting, it's easy. Fundamentally, it's a job, mostly sat on your bum drinking tea. There's very few places you can get a six-figure salary sat on your bum drinking tea. And the jobs are available. I've recruited lots of people as well as software developers, DBAs, architects, and it's very difficult to do. One of my friends is a CTO and he has a massive trouble getting and retaining staff because there are so few good software developers and so many jobs available at the moment. And as a consequence, if you are excellent, you'll get a job at your first interview, guaranteed. It's very difficult if somebody is good at an interview that they're still available by the time that you've called the recruitment agent back. If you're not good, you will still get a job within a few interviews because people need to fill it. And even if you're not very good, you're starting out, you're learning, companies will still want to take you on and will invest in you because software developers are needed everywhere. You can work at home, you can work in your underpants in a lot of jobs, maybe not 5 days a week, but there's certainly the opportunity for it. And a lot, although not all IT departments, have a fairly relaxed culture and are adopting more of an agile approach as time goes on, which can be quite fun to work in. And some companies, yes, they'll put in football tables, they'll put in pool tables, you'll have an Xbox to play with. You might never have the time to play it, but they're there. So it all sounds good, doesn't it? Excellent career. Why did I give it up? Well, I think the bad outweighs the good for me personally, and I need to emphasize this is for me, and this is an excellent career for a lot of people. I, however, have ended up really not enjoying it. First thing is, once you are working for someone else as a software developer rather than doing it as a passion, it's all about the product. Now, I discovered this when I ran my own development company a few years ago. We created our own retail electronic point of sale software. And it was my first taste of being on the business side of things because I suddenly had to make decisions that were completely abhorrent from a technical perspective. Forcing things in, getting it out the door, trying to push features in for one particular client, even though it made no sense to the product overall as a whole. And it was the right thing to do for a business. It was the wrong thing to do from a technological perspective. And having that experience was really important to me because it allowed me to appreciate where those decisions come from. But not everyone has that experience of having to do that themselves. And there are times when, for a business, the right thing to do is absolutely the wrong thing to do from a technical standpoint. And the business is required to deliver constantly. There has to be a new delivery all the time. If you're a startup, you need to deliver because you need funding. If you happen to be working in an R&D department of a company, you probably need to deliver so you can get a paper out there. If you're working for a big multinational, you need to deliver because there has to be something on the roadmap at all times, and there has to be something incremental going on to justify, well, there's a team of 50 people pretty much doing nothing. So, like it or not, if you are working for someone else, there is a need to deliver. And it's often not going to be good things that you're delivering. It's things that have to be delivered because someone somewhere decided it needed to be done for all the wrong reasons. But it's still going to happen and you have to be part of that. And that, I suppose, leads on to the other wonderful thing about delivery in a big company and a big project anywhere. The 80-20 rule. The 80-20 rule has been adapted all over the place. But fundamentally, from a software perspective, it means that 80% of the work takes 20% of the time. The other 20% of the work takes 80% of the time. Now, unfortunately, that last 20% of the work that takes 80% of the time is all that stuff you don't want to do. It's writing those extra unit tests that aren't really that fun. It's all of those validators to make sure input is put in by the user correctly. It's tweaking that little bit of CSS that's still not working on that Internet Explorer 6 browser that you're still supporting 15 years after it was supplemented by something else. Why? It's all of those really annoying bits that no one really enjoys. Certainly not project after project after project. What about the fact that you've got a class, and in that class you've got a whole bunch of getters and setters that do nothing, but your company has a policy that you must comment every method, and this class has got 100 of them. Well, good luck copy pasting the most boring descriptions in the world. Yep, that 80% of your time working for a big company is filled with all of that rubbish, and there's only so many times you can keep doing that rubbish every single project and still try and enjoy it. When actually, the 20% is the part you enjoy. However, it goes very quickly. Meetings. My first experience of this was in 2005 when I worked for Hewlett Packard. I would spend on average 18 hours of my week in meetings, and most of my team weren't even in the same country as me. That's right, I sat on the phone. In fact, I even wrote an internal version of tic-tac-toe that could be played across the network with other people on conference calls because we were so bored during them because it wasn't relevant. Now, a lot of companies have got better than this, and if you are just a junior or mid-level developer, you can probably get out of most meetings bar a daily stand-up in most companies. Get into an architect level, senior, you are going to find your time goes very quickly because, like it or not, you have all the knowledge in your head when you get to that level. There might be documentation there. It probably is all documented if you're doing a good job, and someone can find it somewhere. However, that takes time, and your brain is the quickest way that they can get that data. Consequently, you'll be in a meeting, you'll be asked to make decisions, you'll be asked to say things. It might be for 5 minutes out of a meeting. That time, even if you're billing £800 a day, it's worth every penny to a company. Unfortunately, that means you are going to be spending time in meetings. I've had clients that have been really good clients, have been very good for a lot of people, but the second you get high, I've still ended up spending 10 to 15 hours a week in meetings. Unfortunately, if you want seniority in IT working in a business, that comes with the territory. The next thing that really gets to me is a couple of kind of related issues. One is that most software developers I find these days don't have a truly deep knowledge. They might be able to understand the basics of what an API call is, but most couldn't go into detail of the HTTP protocol. And if they could, and even if they understood the basics of headers, most probably can't then talk to you much about TCP/IP and how that works, let alone how you need to then start dealing at network level with load balancers. And as it gets deeper and deeper into the stack and considering issues, there are some problems that an average software developer, in the majority of places I work, can't solve. I've had all kinds of weird issues where I've had to solve issues. They've been down to network hardware and configuration. We've had issues with disk I/O that have been seriously impacted performance throughout an application, which can only be found with knowledge of virtualization and how the underlying disk structures are set up. And the majority of people I've worked with, and I would go out on a limb and say over 95% of people, have no knowledge other than the direct software stack they're working on, which is fine for a lot of development purposes. However, when you do need to find that problem, if you have that kind of deep knowledge, it's all coming on you. Now, the flip side is I quite enjoy going through those kind of problems. Some of them are immensely pleasurable to work out, and actually some of the most enjoyable things in software. But when there's no one else to really talk to about it, and when you're surrounded by people who are just in a land of the top level of the stack and aren't even considering what goes on underneath, it's very difficult to try and prove a point architecturally when people don't understand the argument you're having. I know that sounds elitist, and yes, it probably is. And there's a few things I've thought through going through this where I think, yeah, I am definitely stuck up, in my opinion, both of myself and software as a whole. But that has been my experience of it. I've been surrounded by people who only have knowledge of the top level of the stack, might be excellent JavaScript and front-end developers, brilliant at Node.js, love all the latest things, but the knowledge is limited to a certain point. And how do you scale up that thing to have 1,000,000 requests a day rather than 100,000? What does that actually entail? Oh, I can install this package, but does it actually work? And the problem is a lot of people can't answer what's going on underneath the hood in that. You can't just throw a new virtual machine or horizontally or vertically scale something without knowing the intricate details of how that impacts the greater ecosystem. And related to this is my current bugbear in commercial software development. The stack. It's all about the stack. The last company I had a contract for, thankfully short-lived, shan't name them, had the worst technology product I have ever seen or worked on. Now, there was a very brief respite from normal day-to-day grudge where they decided they were going to do a rewrite of it in the latest and greatest technologies. And so rather than trying to solve any problems and going, actually, we need to do this many requests a day, these are the things, this is what we need to do, what happens is all the developers go, well, I think we should use this test framework, I think we should use this web front end, but how about we use this one? And software development has become, in my opinion, particularly when it comes to web and mobile applications, and to a large extent in Windows desktop applications, and probably most things actually thinking about it, is let's bolt the pieces together. Well, I want this JavaScript framework for dealing with kind of view management. I want this one for dealing with my responsive HTML. I want to have this framework for making callbacks to my back end. Then underneath that, I'm going to have this API framework where I'm going to use this view model framework to split things up. Then I'm going to use this ORM framework to talk to a database. Now that database, I'm not even going to write any SQL. I'm going to use this framework to create the database for me automatically. I'm going to use this one to store it in MongoDB. And people have spent weeks doing all of this, piecing it all together, and it works perfectly. Apart from frameworks become extinct very quickly. And that company, any company, does not keep stuff up to date. Yeah, you'll find some startups. That's an exclusion in a lot of this. For a period of time, they'll be great. But the bulk of companies, what they will do is finish a product and then they'll stick with that for the next 5 or 6 years. If you get a rewrite within 6 years, you've done really well. Now, think back 6 years ago. Is there any software stack from 6 years ago you'd still want to be using? Probably not, but a lot of jobs you'll go will be using them. And if you get a greenfield project and the focus is solely around technology stacks, you've no idea on the supportability of that. You've no idea on the resourcing and how you can actually get people to service it. So developers, as much as I love the idea of having all these technologies, don't think about the business impacts of choosing the stack. And more than that, it goes back to the not understanding how things work. Why do you need an ORM when actually all you're doing is some really basic CRUD wrapped around stored procedures? It might save you 20 hours up front in some development of doing something yourself. But as a consequence, the second you want to change how databases deploy and manage and scale and get into worlds of SQL replication, going between different servers for your deployment process, and then you also want to start factoring in, well, actually, I need to really tweak and optimize this query for a very specific layout of data structure and use cases, well, bang, your ORM's going to then be spent fighting it. And those 20, even 100 hours you've saved up front, you're going to blow it 1 or 2 issues later down the line, let alone 5 years down the line when no one has a clue how to use that ORM and is bodging stuff in left, right, and center. Seen it all before. And that leads on to spaghettification. Oh boy. So I have seen from, I won't name them, there is a very large, very well respected agile software development house. There are people who work there who are very well known in the software development industry and by bloggers. I mean, if you're watching this, who will think of these people and go, oh, they're great. And I have worked on technology stacks that they've been a part of founding, and they've selected things for all the right reasons. It always happens. The problem is, this goes back to what actually happens with that lovely idea on paper 6 years down the line. And one of these products that I saw ended up with about 1,000, 2,000 classes in a single DLL in Windows. It included WebLogic, desktop logic, hardware integration to the point that on the web server you needed Microsoft Word installed, and you needed MATLAB, and you needed a camera driver for a web server, because that's how the DLL was structured. And doing a simple form with 15, 20 text boxes needs to be populated from a database, 197 queries. To the extent that that single form, when it was rewritten eventually, dropped the SQL database traffic from 20 megabit a second down to 2 on an internal network, which is nuts for what was one form. And originally, it was all very well intended. But as people who have left the project and new people come on and knowledge gets lost and people can't find their way around, code grows and grows and there's layers and there's interfaces because that might be stubbed at some point. It never is stubbed. Like how many people have ever swapped from using SQL Server to Oracle because they thought they might, but there's a whole abstraction layer there just in case. And although I love the reasons for it, the problem is that you end up with this massive code, hundreds of thousands of lines of code, and most of it just calls to another layer, to another layer, to another layer, to another layer, and somewhere way down the stack you get to a line of code. Right-click, go to implementation in Visual Studio. Unless you have experienced that 3,000 times, you've not lived in spaghettification. But the bigger the company, the bigger the product, you will experience it. And this goes back to the 80-20 rule, where you're spending 80% of your time fighting spaghettification and 20% of the time having fun. And this leads me on, there's probably a few more, but the biggest one I think is it's all crud. And I don't mean that in a it's rubbish way, although arguably it is. It's all just primarily, you can definitely disagree with this, create, read, update, delete methods. You can call them whatever you like, but fundamentally there's data operations that create data, read data, update data, delete data. And they wrap all of that up in something pretty. If you're lucky and you get to work on the pretty stuff, if you even like the pretty stuff. And it's okay. There's some interesting, fun aspects of it. And don't get me wrong, there are some projects where that's not the case. There's certainly areas of software development that none of this applies to, but a lot of the software development out there that pays and is plentiful is some kind of stack where there is something pretty, something that grabs data and does stuff to it, and something that has the data in it. And whatever that is, the bulk of what you're doing is going structured as data, structured as code, structured as user interface, and munging it between it. And you can get all fancy stuff within that, but that is fundamentally what your job is. And there are only so many times that you want to rewrite the same concept until it's beautiful and perfect. And then you can use an ORM that does it for you and 10,000 other things, but it's still the same thing. I'm going to stop waffling about why I dislike software development. And I guess I should summarize that this is me. And writing the blog I've done for this, which has a lot more than this, so please do read the blog if you're interested in hearing any more about this and my thoughts on it. I've certainly realised that I've got quite an elitist and jaded view of software development, and an elitist view of myself to some extent. And it is a great job for many people. I think the problem comes doing anything you really truly love as a passion, as your job, is a difficult one to manage. And I think having left software development day-to-day job, I am now enjoying it. I'm only doing the 20% of projects I care about because it's just research-based stuff or it's stuff for myself for fun. Or I'm working on small projects for people that I know where I might be finishing a product, but actually the scope of it is A, it's only the greenfield, B, it's only ever me doing it, C, it's not a big company that's going to carry on do it. So there are ways that all of this is different. Don't get me wrong, if you're working in games development, some of this might be different. I've never worked as games development. If you're working with a startup, while it's in that beautiful phase, while it's starting up and growing really big and fast and you've got lots of opportunity, it's great. But there comes a point, and in many careers and in many jobs, that all of those bad issues apply. And it just doesn't feel right for me. However, it might be right for you. As I say, there are some amazing things I've had. I've had life opportunities that just wouldn't have come to me. I've had financial opportunities that wouldn't have been there. So I guess if you do want to do software development, think why. If you want to have a fairly easy job that's well paid and you like IT and geeky stuff a bit, brilliant. If you are massively passionate about software and hardware and all the detail and how it all works, you need to think what you want out of a job. There are job opportunities I've turned down because the money wasn't right for them. There's some really interesting ones that would have been a tenfold cut in salary, but I could have worked on really interesting embedded devices and kind of actually writing the stuff that goes onto the chips for things to control real-time systems, which would have been such a different challenge. It would have interested me for at least a good few years. But I didn't take it because of money. So if you are going to do this as a career and that's the kind of stuff you love, think what you want to do. Don't just go for the most paid job because it becomes really boring. But the good news is there are loads of jobs out there. Retraining is easy and you won't have a problem getting a job. This was a bit of a long, talky video, not necessarily like my normal ones, but I thought this is a really interesting topic to cover. I would love to know what you think of this, so please do leave your comments below. Leave a thumbs up if you like this, thumbs down if you didn't like it, just so I know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe, and you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter at GuyRobotTV. Thanks.